All right. Welcome, everyone, to episode 6 of the Four Tires and Fuel podcast. I am your co host, Steven Sherrick. I am the rear tire changer on the 38 truck for Front Row Motorsports and the rear tire changer on the 38 Xfinity car for Ryan Sieg Racing.
Hey, I'm John McGee, front tire changer on the 45 Nice Motorsports truck and the 35 Joey Gase Motorsports Xfinity car. And on today's podcast, we have our second ever guest. Last week, we had actually this guy's Jackman on the podcast, Adam Lewis. But Kale, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit.
I'm Kale Uphoff. I'm the front tire changer on the number 18 Xfinity car and the number 11 truck. I've been doing it for a minute, I guess, about 20 years. So I have a little bit of an experience, I guess, with it. But
yeah, Kale, I remember when I first, we all met at Roush Racing, and the first time I met Kale, I remember we were talking about how long he's been doing it, and I think I was like 3 or 4 years old when you started. Maybe not that, but I mean, if it's 20 years, I'm 24, so it's been
that's right then.
This man has been in racing almost since I've been alive. So that's quite an accomplishment to do anything that long. So
yeah, 100%.
So it's too much fun to give it up, you know.
Yeah, trust me, we know.
Yeah. So Sonoma last week, kind of the way the NASCAR schedule rolls, we go from a road course last week all the way out in California, and upcoming this week we're at a short track in Iowa. So, two completely different tracks, two different completely different pit strategies. And the part about NASCAR is bouncing from one week to the next and rolling with the punches and being able to adapt to whatever you get thrown and all that. So I don't know, Steven, how did your Sonoma go?
I mean, I guess I would say it could have went better, but I mean, we really didn't do that bad. So we started the race. I think we were set by owners points, so we were set like third to last. But yeah, we had Matt DiBenedetto in the car. We're gonna have him the rest of the year. So he kind of just was out there, kind of just pacing himself, trying to get a feel for how the car was gonna be on the long run and stuff like that. And we had the opportunity to flip the stage at stage 1, and we chose to stay out. And we came in at the end of stage 1, and the car was just really, like, the front tires, he said, were just not responding. And it was just making it really tight. So we made, I want to say it was like 2 rounds in the right rear for an adjustment and just 4 tires. And, kind of just took our time on that one. Oh, and it was overheating. That was the big thing, is like I think he said his water temp was 260 and his oil temp was like 290. So we had to pull like all the tape off the front grill. But yeah, so we came down, did that, and sent him back out there. And the temperatures went back down, but the handling of the car did not get any better. So he was kind of just hanging on. But yeah, we put scuffs on at the first stage. So basically what scuffs are, tires that have been used before, and I think they use those in qualifying. So we put our qualifying scuffs on because we only had one set of sticker tires, and we wanted to use those at the end of stage 2, so that way we could run those hopefully for the rest of the race. So I don't think the scuffs made it any better, but he was very slow because the handling was so bad. So when we came down for the second stage, we did 2 rounds of wedge, a round of track bar, and 1 round on the left rear. We touched all 3 jack bolts in the back of the car, and sent him back out there, and it said it got a little bit better, but we're kind of just trying to just make it to the end without any significant fires as far as damage wise. And they had that really big pile up in turn 3 and 3A, and we gained a whole bunch of spots off of that, and we ended up finishing 20th. So I mean, we can't really argue with a result, but it, getting there was a chore. So that's pretty much how our day went.
Yeah. Kale, what about you? How did this weekend go for you?
Well, our result was good. We finished second. Did you guys have any tire issues?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
We didn't have any issues.
Our strategy got kind of thrown a curveball right off the bat. The driver complained of a vibration and said he was losing all his rear grip. We were planning on possibly jumping the first stage, but we didn't, we didn't have that set in stone. And when he said he had a vibration, we ended up having to come early, and we had a blister. There was a chunk missing out of the tire, like probably 6 inches wide,
Holy
in
crap.
diameter. And it's good that we pitted when we did. We were able to stay out at the stage and then pit again, at the end of the second stage, get back on track. But he drove that thing up to second, and I think if we had a few more laps, he might have had something for him. Pit stop wise, I don't feel like I know the first pit stop was not very good. The second one was not a lot better, but a little bit better. And I think we might have gained 1 spot on that second stop, but we didn't do him any favors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually saw the picture on Twitter they posted of the tires coming off, and it was kind of the same way for us at North Wilkesboro with the truck. Like we were planning on just doing 2 tire stops, at least the first stage, and maybe 1 4-tire stop, and that's it. But when we decided to do 4 tires the first stop, just because we had Ross Chastain in the truck that weekend, and he was complaining that stuff was just sliding around, and according to our crew chief, like we had way more tire wear than he anticipated at North Wilkesboro with these new repaves and stuff. It's kind of like a catch-22, right? Like the fresh surface in theory should have less tire wear, but I think they're just going so much faster. I think like lap times compared to last year at Sonoma were like 2.5 seconds. So when you're carrying that much more speed into the corner, and where you were previously braking or lifting, now you're going flat out, or whatever. Like I think that kind of, in some cases, negates the advantages of the repave when it comes to tire wear.
It's really interesting because like when I got there this weekend, I heard about how there's no tire wear, the tires aren't wearing, and there was even talks about maybe not taking tires as much as we would have in the past. And that was definitely not the case. We were definitely going to have to take tires, even though it's been repaved. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I talked to our crew chief before the race, and he told us, I was like, what's the tire wear look like? He's like, there is not a lot of tire wear. You could basically just go out for practice, run some laps, come down, cool your tires off, and go out there and run the same lap times. And I was like, oh, okay. So tires aren't really going to play a factor in this race. And then when we got into the race, we were like, hey, tires are definitely what we need. So
yeah. We didn't have tire wear. We had chunks missing out of the tires.
Yeah. Another thing too was like, Johnny and I talked last week about like setup wise, about how the cars were going to be set up for road courses. Yeah. The setup was nothing from what I had at practice, and it took me almost off guard because of how well the setup actually was. And instead of like pumping and bumping both sides, we really didn't have to because the car came up so good on both sides. I was kind of shocked. I don't know if you had the same thing.
No, ours was not set up that bad, but the luxury that I have, I guess, is we can check, we check our car maybe at the shop before we leave, and we really know what we got. I don't know if you have that luxury or not, or if you're just going off of what they tell you, but we can see it before it leaves, and we know what we're going to have.
Right.
Which is, I guess, an advantage to the guys that don't get to look at it. They're going to figure it out on the first stop,
For sure. Yeah. Well, one thing, Kale, that we kind of talked about last week with Adam was, as a front changer, like the variations that we have throughout the season, right? Like you'll have a truck at a short track where the right front will be completely tucked up in there, or a truck, or even, an Xfinity car or what have you at a short track, you're going to have a lot of camber on that left front. You're going to have a ton of brake dust. You're going to have a ton of heat. You get brake dust and heat at road courses, but for me as a front changer, I love road courses because I think the way that the camber is set up in the front, I think it's the easiest to hit lug nuts. Both of the wheels are facing at you. That's just my opinion. I don't know how you view it.
I somewhat agree with that. The camber is definitely better, but I feel like the limited amount of road courses that we do, I'm so used to the other cambers that we have throughout the year, the other racetracks, that I don't like road courses that much. It is technique wise probably easier, but I don't feel like maybe throughout my career I've practiced that enough to even like worry about it,
For sure.
And that look is definitely different for me. Plus the thing that I noticed, our car comes up so high in the front that changes, that obviously changes the, the angle of attack with your gun and all that too. So that's probably what I would struggle with the most at a road course, is when it comes up so high, I'm not adjusting up to that height and then the camber.
Right.
If it's a, a mile and a half track where there's not so much camber on that right front, then it's a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, Kale, when you were talking about like kind of outliers and the way that road courses are set up, and just we don't go to a bunch of them, Steven or Kale, do you feel that way about like travel out to Sonoma? Like there's something to Sonoma for me. It's always like, I don't know, it just feels off the way you get off a plane for 5 hours or whatever have you. You go to the track, you feel like you're 3,000 miles away from wherever that Charlotte, we probably are. And then you do pit stops and get back on a plane and it's like 11-hour round trip of flights. Like something about Sonoma I always feel a little bit off when it comes to it, just based on where it's at, what it takes to get out there.
This is the first time I have ever flown the day of the race to Sonoma. So I would agree with you that is not ideal. You get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, fly for 6 hours, get off the plane, go to the racetrack, get ready, race, and then fly home another 6 hours. It was I think we figured a 28-hour day.
Mm-hmm.
But just that leading up to the race, it's a different experience for me. That's being the first time I've done that. And then for you guys that have never been to Iowa before, I do remember going to Iowa one time, and we had to leave Iowa and fly to Sonoma. Ooh. So that was on the same weekend. I don't remember if it was a truck or an Xfinity car. And then we flew to Sonoma and got there at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and then did a cup race on Sunday.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
And that's a little different too. Yeah. Cause the races are longer and all that too. But that's when I was a little bit younger too. Didn't hurt so bad.
Yeah. I got off the plane and I drove back to my house, and I got home at I want to say it was like 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah.
And I got home, and then my daughter was getting up, and I was like, oh God. So my wife took care of her, and I slept all the way until about noon. And then she woke me up so I could watch my daughter so she could take a shower. And then she left with her, and I went back to sleep, and I slept until like 5:30. I was like,
that's nice.
man.
I was a little bit the same. I got to bed about 8:30, something like that, and my son woke me up about 12, and he was bored, wanted to hang out, and I was like, well, let's do it, So I was awake for the rest of the day, but
Yeah.
just what you deal with,
That's one thing we kind of want to talk about more so in the podcast is about travel. Like, I was talking to some of the guys, who are former college football or NFL guys, and it's like, they're flying out 2 days before the game, staying at hotels, just resting, relaxing. They have 3 or 4 hours of warm up before the game. Like NASCAR is very different than that. A lot like Sonoma, for example, you're flying 6 hours, you get to the track, 3-4 hours, whatever it has. You don't really have any warm-ups. I mean, you have a practice hub and that's about it, but you don't really have any opportunity to do anything on the car before then. You're tired, you've been on a plane the whole time, and 3 hours after that, you get off the plane, you're jumping in front of a car, expected to perform at your absolute best. So for me, that's always, the preparation is really difficult a lot of times when it comes to that.
I would agree with you. And something that I've realized now after having just these last couple years of experience working for a different team than what I had worked for in the past is you're at a pretty good advantage if your team does travel out early, or you can rest. Whereas I know some other teams they're flying the day of the race, just like you said, and that's tough. It's tough to get mentally ready after you've sat on a plane for 6 hours. I know we went straight to the racetrack. We didn't We didn't even eat lunch or anything. So we went straight to the track, started getting ready, and then ate lunch. And by that time, I'm feeling lightheaded already. I'm like, I got to eat something. And then, and it's another hour, and you got to perform. And the warm up stuff, I would say when I was at my best throughout my career is really when I was spending a little bit of time stretching before the race, just loosening up, focusing on that race, coming up. And sometimes if you're running around like we are, you don't have time to do that sometimes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I come from a baseball background, and like the best way I can describe it to people is like, at best you get a little bit of a, light jog, getting the blood moving, but it's like, you hit off a tee by hitting off a practice hub. And then it's like, all right, 20 minutes later, you're going to hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball in a game,
Yeah.
Big jump between what you actually can do to practice and versus what you're actually going to do during the race. There's not a lot of in between there,
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that especially, I don't know if you feel the same way, Stephen, but in, a truck or Xfinity race, like sometimes you only have 2 or 3 stops, right? And so if that first stop, you're still trying to get everything sorted out and you're still tired from the flight, and well, it's like, okay, we wasted that one stop. You might only get one more for the entire race. You don't get 8, 10, 12 stops like you do in the Cup Series to kind of shake.
And that's what a lot of people don't understand, probably, that watch the sport, is that, a Cup race, you do have a lot more opportunities to get back what you may have lost on one pit stop. Whereas in a truck race or Xfinity race, you can't have the mistakes. You can't have them because you can never recover from them fast, in the amount of time you have left in the race.
Yeah. And that's always the hardest thing too, is like when you go out there for the, like in the truck series, all 3 of us pit for very competitive truck teams. Sometimes you can go out there and you're like, okay, this first stop's got to be good because, if, you guys with Corey Heim are coming down leading, or, you got Ross Chastain in the truck and you're coming down, first or second, or, whatever. And with us, with Lane Riggs, the past couple of races, we constantly been in the top 5. It's like, you got to be perfect on that first pit stop. But there is that mystery of unknown, because you don't know exactly how the truck's going to come up or exactly how tight the lug nuts are going to be, and stuff like that. Like, I know we all can go and see the truck before the race at the shop, but it's like when you're actually out there at the pit stop and it's gone out there for stages of roughly about like 45 laps, you know, did he hit anything? Is the right front going to come out exactly the way it did when I saw it at the shop? Is the droop going to be the same? Is he going to have the wheel turned when he's in the truck? Is like, and all that stuff plays a small factor into whether or not you can have a perfect pit stop.
Oh, absolutely. It's more than a small factor. It all matters. It's all important. Yeah. It's all important. Yeah. I know one thing I'll do for practice is, I don't know, you see a lot of guys that will warm up before a practice. They'll really get, stretch and warm up and all this stuff. And I've never been the guy to do that. I know you guys know this. We went through like a warm up routine in practice and all that. And I'm like, why are we doing this? we don't have the opportunity to do that at the racetrack, or we don't do it at the racetrack. And there is opportunity to do it at the racetrack, but we don't, we don't take advantage of that. So during my practices during the week, I jump right into them. It's probably not the best thing to do, but that's a mindset thing for me, that I can just boom, go right into a pit stop rather than having to go through all that warm up and stuff. I just feel more comfortable at the racetrack doing that if I do it in practice.
Yeah, no, that's definitely what I like. I have like kind of poor hip mobility, so I try to do just a couple of hip stretches before the race just to try and warm the hips up.
You need the two of the new hips like I've got.
Yeah. Well, see, I don't want to have to get new hips.
Oh, they're great, man. They feel good. The rest of my body hurts. The rest of my body hurts bad, but those feel good now.
That's the key. Well, that's funny, Kale. You talked about mindset, and I think that's something we kind of wanted to segue into. You've been in the sport for so long as a competitor, as a pit crew, athlete, but also as a coach. I know you were my first coach when I got to Roush, and kind of want to talk about the process that you go through in evaluating talent, and kind of what you think or what you look for that will ultimately make a good tire changer at the Cup Series or whatever have you level. So,
well, real quick, before we dive into that, the kind of just give us a little bit of a backstory on like where you've been, how you got into the sport, who you've pit for, what teams you've been on, kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Because things have definitely changed since I got in the sport, and how we go about finding talent or finding athletes. When I started, so first of all, I started off going to Clemson University for motorsports engineering, and I quickly found out that school wasn't for me. Like, I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. I failed out of some classes, not going to work. So I know you've all heard of like the NASCAR school that's up here. I went to another one during, it was probably in 2002, 2000. It was called Stock Car Racing Career Development, and I don't think it exists anymore. It was literally two guys that had a Xfinity shop or Bush shop at the time that taught people how to work on race cars. So I went there for, I went there for 10, it was 10 weeks long. We stayed in an awful motel. That was where they put us up at, and it was a motel. It was pretty sketchy, but that's where they taught me you learned all the different positions. It wasn't just tire changing or tire carry and jacking. You actually went through all the positions, kind of felt them all out, and then also learned to work on the cars. So after I did my 10 weeks there, they said, well, we'll find you a job in the industry, and they didn't. I did have an opportunity to move out to Oklahoma to work for Morgan Dollar truck team. but I opted to not do that. I didn't want to move that far out to do that. And I moved back to Wisconsin, and just happened that one of kind of a family friend or a neighbor, they were starting up an ASA team, and that series isn't around anymore either. But they were taking tryouts for pit crew guys, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I got this, So I went and tried it out and started changing tires for him for a year, and then started talking to people at the racetrack, and ended up moving my way back down south to South Carolina, worked for an Xfinity team there for a year, and then eventually back up to Mooresville, where I kind of full circle, the guy that I was working for in the ASA series started driving a truck at Roush, and he got me a job at Roush, and I spent 17 years there as a mechanic and a tire changer. And then eventually the last 4 years of my career there, I was a coach, as you guys know. And then I decided to take a different route and get out of that, and just go back to changing tires and doing a normal job during the week. So
Well, there you go. That's pretty awesome. I mean, like, spending 17 years at one place, like, I'm coming up on my 5th year at Roush or RFK, and it's like, I'm like, oh my God, I've been here that long. Like, it's wild.
I honestly, I mean, it's weird. Like, you think about it, I'm like, man, I didn't realize I was there that long.
Mhm.
But I started in I mean, I got to work with a lot of different really good drivers. Ricky Craven was the first driver I worked for in the truck series at Roush, and then it went to Mark Martin, Travis Quapple. We won a ton of races there, and then moved to the Cup Series, right from the Truck Series to the Cup Series. So I didn't actually do Xfinity, and worked for David Reagan and Trevor Bain, Ricky Stenhouse, Carl Edwards. Had an opportunity to win a championship with Carl Edwards, and we just fell short. We tied for the points championship and lost it on the amount of wins that we had that year. Stewart had more wins, so that was like the biggest heartbreaker ever.
That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, time flies, man, and the seasons, they're long, but they kind of, at points of the season, they're like, man, this is dragging on, and then at points they're flying by, it's like, man, we're already to Phoenix, the end of the year. So
yeah. And one thing we talked with Adam Lewis about last week was like all the changes that the sport has made, during that time too, with how many guys they allow at the wall, from 7-man to 6-man, now to 5-man. And then obviously from the change to 5-lug to the single lug system in the Cup Series now with the next gen car, a lot of, this sport is being able to adapt to change, right? And being able to, learn a new skill, or, adapt from track to track, from, vehicle to, from a truck to an Xfinity car to a Cup car. And, part of that is, from different rules that the guys who are allowed over the wall, and entirely different, systems of changing tires from 5-lug to single lug. So how have you kind of navigated that over your career?
Well, you guys probably don't remember. We used to have guys that would travel with us. They were, we're considered the B team now, I guess, but we had an actual B team that would come with us and set up the pit box and everything with us. Like,
big time fancy guys.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have to do anything. But then again, we were also, we'd also get to the racetrack probably 8 hours before the race, where we don't do that anymore. And I remember when they started to go to the roster limits, I was like, man, how are we going to get all this stuff done before the race? Like, we only, we used to have 10 guys. Now we got 5, and we got to do the same amount of work. How's it all going to happen? you know, we're a different breed of people. I feel like now that I've kind of stepped out of racing full time and seen how some other industries work. We just made it happen. Like we didn't it didn't matter, you know, how long it took or whatever. We were going to get it done in the amount of time we had, and we were going to race. And we do that still now. You know, you're never late to the racetrack. The car always shows up there. You know, everybody just the type of people that are in the sport. Everybody just groups together and gets the job done. And I think you don't find that everywhere in every industry or every sport, I guess.
Yeah, I was at my son had a quarter midget race yesterday, and I was talking to one of the guys there, and that was one of the things is we were talking about is that when you're when we're there at that racetrack, you know, it doesn't matter what class you're racing in, whether it's a rookie class, whether it's a senior class, whether it's whatever, everybody that's there, if something happens on the racetrack and one of the cars breaks, everybody it doesn't matter if their kid's out there racing on the track against that kid, they're gonna go and they're gonna help get that car back on the racetrack because they want everybody to be as good as possible. And it's to the point where I see that all the way through when you're racing with kids at the quarter midget level, and then you're racing all the way up into the Cup Series. You have the same thing of everybody just wants to get the job done and get the car back out onto the racetrack.
Yeah, it really is a different breed. Like I've started doing IMSA racing, endurance sports car stuff, and I was talking to one of the guys on my crew chief. He's from Germany originally. He did growing up in the German sports car touring league. And he was telling me that they had to sign an agreement with their team at the beginning of the year that they were not allowed to talk to anybody on any other team for the entire year. And everybody was the same way. And he said, you couldn't say anything to another, not even a hi or like, excuse me. You weren't allowed to say anything to another driver, not even another team. And I was like, man, if you try that in NASCAR, I think people would riot immediately. So anyway,
this podcast wouldn't be possible.
Right. So I say that to say this. I mean, like it is right. At the end of the day, we're all competitors. Like we all want to win races and do the best that we can. But also it's like, look, I want to beat you at your best. I don't want, to me, that's the best. I don't want to beat you when you're already down and whatever. Okay. Yeah, I won the race, but did we really earn it? And so, I think there is a lot of that, on pit road. It's like, look, it's like at the end of the day, yeah, I want to win races. And if I win, that means you have to lose. But, there's also a lot of, hey, after this, come on the podcast or, grab
it. Yeah. Oh yeah. And John, you talked about adapting to changes and stuff like that. There's been a ton of changes throughout the sport since I started to now. And that kind of would lead me into part of my coaching thing was that's one thing that I definitely look for is somebody that can adapt to change or adapt to things going wrong. Right. Some people handle that better than others. And I would say that the majority of the guys on pit crews, they do well at adapting to different situations. We don't know where we get thrown at us every pit stop, I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's one big thing. And I think that's just the type of personalities that you see in the sport, and it makes it easier to adapt to different changes, rule changes, whatever. There's been a lot of different rule changes on pit road where, it's kind of exciting when they do something like that. You're like, all right, how are we going to be the fastest ones to do it this way? When they take a guy away or whatever, like, what are we going to do that's innovative and nobody else is going to think of, and we're going to be the first ones to do it, and we're going to beat everybody by 2 seconds on pit road, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's I keep thinking about it, and like we're all changers here, so it's kind of like you talk about changes throughout the years. How many different guns have you used on pit road?
Oh, I've used, okay, so I mean, I started with an Ingersoll Thunder gun, you know. Hurd was the one that made them or built them, and that's what we started with. And it was, I mean, I thought the thing was awesome, you know, like this. You've never seen anything like this, you know. And it's funny because my brother and my dad, they're in Wisconsin, they're mechanics too, you know. And I'm like, yeah, you got to see this thing, you know, like. And then we started developing clutch guns, which is, it's just the same housing, but completely different internals. And it was like, what is this thing? This is nasty. Like, this is another step above that. And then we went through like probably 3 different variations of that type of clutch gun. And then NASCAR decides to switch to the Paoli guns, which is like a hybrid between a clutch gun and a hammer gun, kind of. It's essentially a clutch gun, but a little bit different. And the biggest thing for me there was the size of that thing. Like, I'll be honest with you, I just had the opportunity. I don't even know if I should say this, but I just had the opportunity to use one of the Gibbs clutch guns. So when back in the day when I was at Roush changing, we were chasing the Gibbs guys. Like, they were the best on pit road, hands down, fastest guys. And I couldn't figure, I'm like, you know, there's no way their equipment is that much better. But I just got to use one 2 weeks ago, and I know why they were that much better. There's that era in the sport was so much fun for me because we were constantly designing different parts for guns. And hey, you know, we were testing guns all the time. Like, hey, try this, try this, try this. Is this better? Is that better? Is it? And you always had different opinions on that stuff too. Everybody has a different feel. But I thought, you know, you guys know that I was building guns at the shop, and I thought the stuff we had was awesome. And I would have told you I'd go up against anybody any day with the stuff that I would build you. Okay. I found out 2 weeks ago that I wouldn't go up against somebody with that, knowing what they have now. Like, it was insane. Like, made the job so much easier. It's crazy the amount of changes we've gone through in the guns. And even today with the Paoli guns, you guys experience this. You might get to the racetrack and get a new gun that week, and it's different. It's different than the one you had. I mean, it's the same gun, but it feels different. It reacts different. It does different stuff. It is a challenge to get in a mindset that gun is going to do the job you need it to do that day, right? It doesn't matter if I operate at my peak. I'm hoping that gun does too, because that affects my job, right?
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. And so, yeah, for those of you who don't know, like back in the day, NASCAR teams were building their own guns. There was kind of like a free for all, you know, who could build the best part. Let's do all this R&D, just like Kale was talking about. Let's beat Gibbs. Let's beat RCR. You know, who has the best gun? And now on the Xfinity and Cup Series, every team in theory gets the same gun. They're provided to you by Paoli an hour before the race. And I think they're thinking of that as so you can't do, you know, crazy modifications with them or something like that.
Yeah, it's supposed to even up the playing field, and they don't want you messing with them. That's why they give them to you an hour before the race. But
yeah, and so it really is. It's like, you know, as even as they're supposed to be, they're not necessarily. It's like some are just better. Some have grip tape where you like them. Others are not that way. Others, as much as I say, some just don't have as much pop as the others. I've found, and I keep using baseball references because that's what I've had. But it's like, imagine we had all the players show up to the game an hour before the race. They were using one bat in batting practice the whole week, and it's like, hey, you have to pick this bat up. You've never swung it before, and you got to go up there and hit and try and get a hit your first hit. You've never hit with it before. It should be the same as the other one that you've been using, but we don't know. So
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know. When I say it this way, it really is like what we do. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for, but it's what it is. It's how we've done it, and I can play now on the podcast, but when it's race time, it's like I don't. It does you no good to do any of that. So.
You want to know what's challenging? Is trying to coach tire changers when you have to deal with guns like that too. Like I have to somehow be like, no, it's going to be okay. It'll be fine. It's fine. Get it out of your head that it's going to be fine. When I know that, that thing is not that. It doesn't work like you'd want it to, So like, that's a tough thing. That was a tough thing to navigate a lot of, and a lot of it too, I have found myself is mental. So the guns themselves, they all seem to work relatively the same. They feel a lot different. So it was always a mental thing for me to say, all right, I know, like if I could hit it on a practice hub and the nuts would come off, then I know it'll do it on the car during a pit stop. But it's a mental struggle to get yourself to just trust and believe in that equipment.
Well, you talk about the coaching tire changers, and the gun's not that. The gun might not be acting that great, but you're like, okay, get it out of your head, whatever. But how often do people watch it on TV and they see how fast you are, they see how fast Johnny is, I am, whatever, all the tire changers on pit road, and you get that new kid that comes and he's like, oh, I got this, and he handles the gun and he's like all over the place, and you're like, yo, slow down. Like,
oh yeah,
how often does that happen?
It happens all the time. I mean, it's I don't know. It's like it's all the perception. People think like it's so fast. You got to go as fast as you can possibly go, and it's really not even possible to do that. Like, I mean, there's a couple of guys out there that will really wow you and be like, wow, I can't believe their hands can move that fast and all that. But I know throughout my career, that is the key phrase. You slow down to go faster,
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I kind of want to ask about how you evaluate or what you think about the mentality of a good tire changer. Because realistically, like so much is expected of us. Like our standards are very, very high, especially when you get to a competitive team, whether that's in the truck, Xfinity, Cup Series. It's not only to go fast and be consistent, but being consistent is the big thing, right? And like, how accurate can you be? How often can you replicate that? And when the standards are so high, like 95% accurate or whatever that number is, and 13 or 12-second stops, over and over and over and over again. We need you to be perfect all race. Like, how do you evaluate that with new guys coming in, and what specifically do you teach them about how to go about being a tire changer with these expectations?
tough. And I know you came. I want to say that you might have been the first tire changer that really had never done it before. That I was able to coach a little bit. I didn't coach you that much, but a little bit. And now you've made it to where you're doing it on a full-time basis. What the thing for me, I guess I learned through doing it all like a lot of it myself and watching other people change tires. So when I got into coaching, I didn't necessarily try to coach as much as I did just guide. Let you kind of like, I wanted you to kind of do it. I want you to kind of feel it. I would guide you in the direction I wanted you to go or thought you needed to go, but I can't teach like your body how to move exactly like mine does, or the next guy. So, a lot of what we do is just hand-eye coordination. So it was more or less like, I want you to hit these lug nuts. I want you to hit 5 lug nuts. Count in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Get that rhythm going. I used to try and coach some guys with a metronome to keep that cadence going, because it's that snap, that pop on each lug nut in the same amount of time in between each nut. And that's what gets you your 5 lug nuts off in a second. People don't realize, I think, how fast we are doing it. I believe I looked this up. Like, it takes a Major League Baseball pitcher 0.2 seconds to react to a pitch. And we're doing that 5 times in a row on lug nuts, 0.2 of a second in between each nut. So that's pretty impressive, in my opinion, of what we do. But it was more just trying to teach that repetition. And people always preach athletes and all that. Yes, we are athletes. And I think everybody in the sport is an athlete that goes over the wall. But I would be willing to say that you're never going your full speed ever, really, during a pit stop. Like from A to B, you're not sprinting anywhere. It's all controlled movement. So I was more into watching what you would do in front of the wheel and how, your body mechanics that way. If that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
How would you so when you're coaching up guys and you've been with a guy for a couple of months or a couple of weeks, however long the time period is, how do you like see that guy and be like, okay, he's got it. Like he can be somebody, or be like, he can be good. Like, how do you evaluate, like almost like evaluating potential for someone?
Well, that's for me, that was very tough to do. It's not a fast process either. This stuff doesn't happen. Like, you don't teach somebody how to do this overnight. And as you both know, you didn't get to where you're at in a month. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't happen. I don't have a definite answer for you on that, other than, in my opinion, I needed real at track experience reps for the guys to be able to evaluate them. Okay. Because and that was, when I was coaching, that was tough too, because we didn't have a lot of opportunities to get some of our development guys to the racetrack like some teams did. And there's not really a good farm team, right? Like, you don't have the minor leagues really. Everybody is kind of at the same level when you get to Truck Xfinity and Cup, for the most part, right? Like, everybody's real talented. You don't have a step below that. So a lot of it was practice at the shop, and guys could perform like crazy. Like, I'd have guys that were awesome at practice and go to the racetrack, and it's like they've never done it before. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, we've practiced all off season, and it just couldn't do it. So that's what's it's kind of tough in the coaching this. You're hoping that when they get to the racetrack, they're going to do the same thing they do in practice. So for me, I mean, I needed I needed to see a guy work out for a couple months and then get to the racetrack a few times and just see how that worked out, before I could tell you. There's been a very few amount of people that I've been like, yeah, that guy's got it. And like, I could just tell he's got it. And that there's one, I don't want to mention his name, but one guy showed up and I was like, this kid has got it. But he also changed a little bit of tires, practiced a little bit at a different organization before he got to me. But as soon as I saw him, I'm like, that guy's, he's got it. And now he's out winning races.
He's talking about Johnny.
Yeah, that was the first thing that popped in my head when he said that. Yeah. No, but one thing I want to talk about is, right, you came in as a mechanic, learn skills, how to work on race cars. That's not necessarily the case now with a lot of guys that are coming in, especially from an athletic background.
No,
right? So,
I would say it's not the case at all anymore. I don't
Right.
even know that any of the teams even do that anymore, really. Like your top teams don't do that anymore, right?
Yep. So that's a big change, right? So, and I was that way. I had never worked on cars, never done anything before, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna try and do this completely foreign thing. Maybe I'll be good at it. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll be somewhere in the middle. For me, that's how I was. It was like a brand new, completely blank slate. And, I think that's an interesting dynamic now where you get it on the Cup Series where it's like, look, guys used to be mechanics, and they used to know, all right, they've been around tools, they've been around cars and, all that kind of stuff. And now it's like you get guys and it's like, look, we just got you off a football field 6 months ago. You've never touched a car in your life. You don't, I know this from experience. I was that guy. It's like, how do you go about that entire process of like, look, this is how everything works. Not only your position, but this is the rundown. This is, start taking notes on page 1. We're going to get you where you need to be.
Well, I never really, I've thought about that before. It's something that in my experience, I remember back to when I was in high school, and I was always working on cars and stuff like that, even in high school. And I had one of my buddies come over to my dad's shop and I was working on my truck. And I said, hey, will you throw me a 9/16 wrench? And he looked at me like I had 3 heads. He's like, what is a 9/16 wrench?
Mm-hmm.
So I took that into account a little bit when I had some new guys coming into coach. It's like, this guy doesn't know what this piece of equipment, this gun in his hand is supposed to do. And I tried to anyways explain the whole mechanics behind it. Like, you're trying to spin this nut on and tighten it, but you can't necessarily teach that either. I can explain it to you, but you have to go and feel it, right? Like, you wouldn't know what that is until you felt it and be like, oh, okay, that nut just tightened up. And then, okay, now how do I get it off? And it's a tough thing to explain all that. There's a lot that goes into that. And somebody that's never experienced that before, it takes quite a while to get that. I don't know how you felt about it. I'm curious to know from you, like, exactly what that experience was like. Because I didn't have the same experience growing up. Like, I was always into that stuff, whereas you, like you said, were brand new to that. That's crazy to me. Like, it's amazing that you can, get to where you're at now from never knowing that stuff before.
Yeah, like so I talked to when I first came in contact with Roush, I was talking to the strength and conditioning coach, and I remember what he said. He was like, look, from what we see, we like, your height, your weight, some attributes, but we have no clue if you're going to be good at this. And you're going to commit to not making anything for the first 6 months. You're going to move somewhere and you're going to try this completely foreign concept to you. And you're going to hope that you're good at it, basically. And I was like, well, okay, I guess I'll try it, And so, yeah. Sorry, there's a GTA.
They're coming for you, man.
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I feel like I think every police officer in Charlotte is outside my street right now. But yeah, I mean, I think getting the process down was one thing. Another thing that I did not expect was like, yeah, I was kind of a NASCAR fan, but I was not anything crazy. So I was like, oh, all the tracks are the same. They're all ovals, right? They all must be the same. And then when I started learning like race IQ, like, okay, we're racing a super speedway this week. Tires are not going to matter. It's going to be about fuel. If you do change tires, it's going to be way tucked up in there. There's going to be a lot of droop. Your whole job is just not make any mistakes, get everything tight, get the car back out there in the draft. Compared to a short track where, hey, we're going to change tires, at Martinsville 6 times. And, there's going to be 14% camber on the left front. And, we might only, we're going to do right side tires, or we're going to put a packer in because we're hitting the splitter coming into the braking zone. Like that was like, you were speaking a foreign language to me when I first started that. And so, and then you throw in road courses and intermediates and everything in between, right? And then you go from the front to the rears, and it's like, well, your choreography changes. You're going from pulling packers and, dealing with camber to rubbers and, all sorts of tight fenders and stuff like that in the rear. And all that stuff when I just thought about it, I was like, yeah, sure. They can't be different. Like they're all just going around on a circle.
All the same.
Right. And so that was like a big thing that I had to learn was like, this track is going to be different than this track. And here's why. And this is why I need to prepare for it.
Well, and let me ask you this too. Was there a big difference then from practice to the race? Because the practice car essentially is always the same, right? Like we did the best we could do with adjusting the car to whatever racetrack maybe we're going to, but it was never the same, was it?
Right. It's never the same, and there's things at the track that you cannot replicate at practice. You can't replicate damage. You can't replicate brake dust. You can't replicate heat. You can't replicate some mechanic put the lug nuts on at 110 foot-pounds, right? Like, I mean,
that never happens.
Right. So, those were things that like, yes, you can change it up and try and make as many variations as you can at practice. But at the end of the day, it's like, and two, another thing, like, right, we would tape off what each pit stop would be like. But like, maybe the pavement is terrible and there's a big crack right down the middle of your pit box, or maybe you're in the corner of, and you can't see your car until it's 3 pit stalls in front of you, or maybe there's somebody in front of you and behind you and they're pulling out right when you're getting in. And, that's all the stuff that you cannot replicate until you get to the track. And so, it took a lot of time for me to learn that and to study, but you had to be like how I was. It's like, I'm going to be a student of the game, right? Like I'm going to look at a scouting report like I would when I was playing baseball. It's like, this guy, I think he's going to throw these pitches. I think he's going to throw this hard. The field has a long left field fence, but a short right field. The infield has a big lip at second base. Like that was kind of how I viewed the tracks. Like, Martinsville is going to be this way. It's going to have X, Y, and Z. I need to prepare for it this way. And I don't know.
Yeah, that's impressive. Like that's really like, I like to hear that. And not a lot of guys approach it like that. But that's impressive to hear. That's a good job on your part.
I appreciate.
And that's how you got to be.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, me and Steven are definitely not, compared to the guys that are coming in now. Like, we're not the most athletically gifted guys on the planet or on pit road. But I think
speak for yourself.
That's right. But I think that's what
seen me lately.
This is, yeah, we're going to just start giving out fitness advice on this podcast. We're not going to talk about going to be giving fitness advice. But no, I learned it a lot from Steven. I learned it a lot from you. It was like race IQ. And we talked about it so much. We had guys who were some of the most athletic people I've ever seen in my entire life. And it was like, you can throw a tire on in a perfect situation. You are amazing at that. But when it came to trying to explain like why this race or why this stop is going to be different than another stop, it was just like in one ear and out the other. And
Yep.
I think that's what people don't understand. You can be as talented and as gifted as you can, but if that stuff never sticks, like it's going to be really hard for you when stuff, you know.
And that goes back to, like we talked about, being able to adapt, right? Being able to adapt to different situations all the time, no matter what. And then also that goes back to what I was telling you about coaching and how I felt like I needed to see guys at the racetrack, because you both know that you can't replicate, and you said it, you cannot replicate all the situations in practice. So you just don't know how someone's going to react to those different situations.
Yeah, thankfully we all kind of like we all were able to understand it, and we've had teammates help a long way. Like the other guys on your team, they can help
Absolutely.
get you through those tough situations and help you through a lot of stuff that you don't understand. Because I know when I was on the team with Johnny, it was his first year, and there was a lot of stuff he didn't know. There's a lot of stuff that he was still learning, and I tried to help and walk him through, like, because it was my third year at the track, so I was like, okay, like we're kind of looking for this happens, whatever, and like especially when it came to like damage repair, it was kind of just like we didn't. I don't know how it is on your truck, but like in your Xfinity car, but we were the ones that went over the wall to fix the damage, and I know you've done that a lot. So it's like, when you're new at it, like Johnny was, it was kind of like, hey, we need this, we need to do this, we need to pull here, we need to pry there, we need to get this out. This is more important than this over here. Like, and teaching that in the heat of the moment was definitely like it becomes eye-opening to the person you're teaching it to, and it helps you as a team get stronger.
Absolutely. And a couple different things. The opposite could also happen, right? Say you don't have a good teammate. This guy that's learning or doesn't know as much may not ever get to where he needs to be because they had a bad teammate. I've had bad teammates before that just don't want to help out or whatever. But you're right. Like learning from somebody else's experiences is big too. And throughout my career, I learned from just watching different things happen or people telling me different experiences that they've had. And then I totally forgot what the other thing is I was going to say, but
it happens to me all the time. It's my old age.
There was another good point I had to make, but it's
it was so good it's gone.
It's so good it's gone.
Yeah. No, like
I know what it was now. I know. So you talked about damage repair. And that's something that's gotten lost over, in my opinion, it's gotten lost over the evolution of the sport. So, like I said, when I came in, I was working as a mechanic. I worked on the cars all week long. We went to the racetrack. I mean, when I started in the truck series, I worked all week long to get that truck ready, traveled to the racetrack, worked on it at the racetrack, got it through practice, got it through qualifying, and then changed my clothes into a fire suit and pitted it. So we did it all. And we knew everything about damage repair. So I knew what to look at. I knew all that stuff. Whereas someone that's coming new into the sport that's never seen a race car before, they don't have a clue as to what any of the suspension parts are or what to look at, what might be broken, where do I need to pull this fender, where do I need to clearance it? And that's something that's gotten lost a little bit. So that's why you see a lot of these teams, like, if the car's damaged, they just send out a road crew guys or whatever. Whereas we used to be doing that all ourselves. And
Yeah.
I always thought that was important for pit crew guys to understand at least all the different parts of the car,
Mm-hmm.
what to look for. And
Yeah. Well, and one thing too is like when I, was at Roush, like everything was perfect on the practice pad. I had everything was laid out for me. The wheels were glued, already. Air was in the bottles, everything was set up. And I remember I got to my first race and, I started on a team that was, bottom of the barrel. And I remember like an hour before the race, I didn't have lug nuts. I didn't have air in my bottle. I didn't have the right connection to the regulator.
you didn't have a hose. Yeah, I remember I brought you one.
I'm running over you, freaking out. I didn't have a radio. Like I was like, okay, I feel confident about the pit stops. Everything else is going completely wrong.
And
I knew how to fix
I'm gonna
it.
be honest, I felt terrible about that too. Like I was not happy about the situation that you got put in. But I also didn't necessarily have 100% to do with that situation. So I tried to help as much as I could.
But
No,
see, it's situations like that that make you like better on pit road, because then you're like the worst of the worst is over here, and I've been through that. So then when you get
Yes.
to the teams like we're on, that you get there and you're like, oh, I appreciate this so much more because of the stuff that I've already been through.
Yeah.
And it makes it so much easier. It makes your job easier. Like the whole thing just flows better.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you learn, I think it's true that a lot of times you learn more from failure than you do from success. Like you learn more from a bad situation. Like it was good for me to be on those teams. It helped my career tremendously because I was like, okay, now if something goes wrong, I know how to fix it. If I never had that situation before, I was like, I'm still, So anyway, as bad as it was at the time, I'm glad it happened because it made the situation made me a better, more well-rounded person on pit road. So
Yeah, but I think we're gonna I think we should shift gears a little bit and
we've gone a little
transition
bit over.
transition over to talking about next week, or this coming weekend, I should say. We're heading out to Iowa. It is a track that we have not been to in I don't know, a couple of years. So I think Kale, out of the three of us, is the only one that's been there, and it's been a while for him.
Neither of you have been there, right?
No, I've never been there.
They're all the same. All the racetracks are the same. They're all the same. Don't worry about it.
We always spend like 20 minutes talking about, oh, this pit road is different than this pit road because of X, Y, and Z. Yeah, all that was just, we pulled it out of our ass. Like, we've just been trying to act like we know what we're talking about this whole time.
I wish I mean, I'll be honest with you. I wish I knew exactly what Iowa's pit road looked like, but off the top of my head, thinking about it, I cannot remember. Like even, I just remember it being normal. I don't remember anything being, unusual about that place where, we get a lot of the racetrack pit roads are very similar. And then you have some that are way off, different, whatever. But this one seems pretty normal to me. I don't remember any standout things like it being real slick or anything like that. The boxes are, I think, a standard, box size. But that's really all.
I looked up some pictures and like on Google and stuff, and was trying to do a little bit of research so I could make this segment a little bit longer than it's gonna be. But the pit box sizes looked generally the same size as like a Charlotte or a Kentucky or a Kansas or one of those Midwest tracks. And like, it seems like it's very straightforward, straight down pit road. The only thing that I think is a little bit different is like it from what I've raced in iRacing, it feels almost like the pit road is a lot more closer to the center of the track than some of the other ones are, but I know it is a smaller track, so it it kind of is what it is at this point. It's like a straight pit road, standard boxes, let her eat.
The only thing I'm really concerned about is just pit strategy. You know, a lot of these Xfinity teams, they've been there in the past, but some of them haven't. Or, you know, I don't know how there's this partial repave that happened. I don't know what that's going to be. I mean, I'm just going to keep the options open, right? Like 2 tires stops are definitely a possibility, but I'm going to assume that we're going to be doing 4 tires most of the time. So, you know.
I'd be willing to bet that it's going to be 4 tires, especially with a repave and them not knowing. Like I know the notes that they talked about us having were from 2019. That's the last notes that they have from anybody being there. So I don't know what tire compound they're bringing, you know, and based off of the previous races this year and what they've told me that the strategy is going to be before the race starts, I'm going to go ahead and say the strategy is not going to be whatever they tell us it is when the race starts, because you pretty much throw that out the window. And just like at Sonoma, right? Oh, there's no tire wear. The tires don't wear. Well, 10 laps into the run and we got a hole this big in our tires because they are wearing, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what I'd be willing to bet. And I'm thinking 4 tires every time, you know?
I think so. They went and did a tire test there 2 weeks ago, I think. And for on the Cup side. And from what I heard, the rumblings from that test was that the bottom groove is really fast, but once you get out of the bottom groove, it's going to be a little sketchy. But I know turn 1 has some hellacious bumps in it, and it's going to be interesting to see these Cup cars go over that. And even these newer style Xfinity cars is going to be cool to see them barreling through turn 1 and 2 and overtop all those bumps and 2 and 3 wide. And we'll just have to play it by ear and see what it is. But I think for strategy wise, yes, we're probably going to change 4 tires every time.
Yeah. Well, that's good. We went long in the first 2 segments of the show, and we didn't have much to say this time.
Hopefully, we'll have more next week about it.
Yeah. We'll give them. That's good though. I'm glad the whole show wasn't like this. You know, we had a lot of good content before, and you know, watch the first hour of the show.
No, watch the whole thing. Watch the whole thing, the whole video.
There's just not. I don't. It's funny because I don't have a lot of memories from Iowa because I was on a Cup car at Roush. Ricky Stenhouse won multiple races at Iowa in an Xfinity car, but I was on a Cup car and we didn't go to Iowa at the time. So I'm kind of like you guys. I haven't been there much. I want to say I've been there twice, and that's it.
Yeah.
But it's good to see that the Cup Series is going back. You know, going there. It's going to be interesting. And hopefully it's multiple groove racing with this new repave thing. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I'm glad they're going back. I think it's like a good track, like for the car, you know, especially in the Xfinity series. I think it'll be really exciting racing. The driver's track for sure. I'm, you know, I'll save my final word till we get back, but I'm happy we're going there, you know.
It's in the middle of a cornfield too. I mean,
even
better. I heard that the Cup race is sold out, the Xfinity race is sold out, and even the ARCA race is sold out for this event at Iowa.
Wow.
When was the last time an ARCA race got sold out?
There's nothing to do in Iowa. That's why
it's in a cornfield, man. It's in the middle of a cornfield.
They're coming from 500 miles around because there's nothing else to do there.
I do have a lot of friends from Wisconsin that are going to Iowa for the race.
Yep.
Well, there you go.
So well, we'll leave it there. Really appreciate Kale coming on the show, and you know, it's awesome to have some you know, different opinions, especially on the coaching side, and you know, with you and Adam Lewis coming in, definitely a veteran's perspective on things on pit road and how everything's changed. And we'll get back to you next week we'll have more information about Iowa and look forward to New Hampshire. And yeah, Kale, thanks for coming on. We'd love to have you back on in the future too.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, and we appreciate you coming out and all of our guests that have been on so far. And yeah, just wanted to quickly say that you guys, everyone listening, we appreciate you. You can catch the podcast on mine and Johnny's YouTube channels. We are on Spotify, and we just recently got added on to iHeartRadio and Amazon Music. You can listen to the podcast on any one of those platforms, and we're trying to continue to add more and have more great episodes.
Yeah. And like I told Steven, I was like, if people listen, great. But at the end of the day, like, these are the conversations I like to have. And I don't have enough of them, honestly, now that we've all kind of spread out. And so doing this every week, it's like if we only had one listener, I would still do it, So, and then I enjoy doing and appreciate having some guys on who feel the same way. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep. Well, we definitely appreciate every one of you guys listening, and we will catch you guys in the next one. Till then, you guys be good.